Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I had a mic failure. It's either an over 50 problem or plug wasn't plugged into the GoPro. I don't know. Who knows? They're both believable. I'm just explaining to you that it took a while to get those nuts for the bottom section of the front frame clip. The nuts are one-time use, so I ordered new ones. They got lost. They took forever to come in. I called Partzilla. They sent me out 4 new ones right away. I got them. So I still never got the original order. But we're getting back to putting the new steering rack on, and I'm pretty excited about it. I'm looking forward to finishing up the machine. We've had a lot of other things going on, and it's one of those things where, in my mind, I've got 3 or 4 hours of work left at best, and I just kind of want to tackle it because look at this mess. I mean, there's just crap everywhere, and it's time to get back on this machine and get it back together and find out if this fixes our problem. All right, the camera work in this clip is pretty shoddy. Sorry, guys. Basically, all I'm doing, I've got the new rack chucked in the vise, and I'm just trying to make sure the rack is centered. You want to make sure it's totally centered before you put it on the machine, because if you don't, your steering is going to be off. However, it's off center. So not only do you want to make sure it's centered from side to side, you want to look at your machine, make sure your steering wheel is centered for the same reason. If it's not centered, you put the rack in centered and the steering wheel's turned. Guess what? That's how your steering wheel is going to be turned while you're driving. So it's just real important when you're putting your machine back together that your steering wheel is centered. You can see mine wasn't, so it's a good thing we checked. And I'm just telling you, it's real easy when you get going to forget little things like this. So make sure everything's centered up and you're good to go. All right, all I'm doing here is I'm getting out my grease gun and my needle greaser, and I'm taking the 2 existing spherical joints on the end of the steering rack that attach to my tie rods. They have boots on them that are pre-greased, but that grease has been in there a while, and I'm sure some of it has seeped out. So I'm just undoing the little snap clips on each end, squirting a little bit of grease in there, and putting the snap clips back on, just getting it 100% ready to go back on the machine. I'm also going to take my grease gun and shoot grease in the steering rack. There's a Zerk on the bottom, and I'm just going to make sure I shoot enough grease in there so I can see it to start coming out the sides, each end where that rack pivots or projects and retracts into the rack, I should say. You want to see grease in there. They obviously aren't going to ship it to you dry. At least I know Super ATV wouldn't, or Polaris. But they're not going to have it full of grease, so it's just a mess everywhere. So I always just make sure, hey, it's greased till the end, or the grease is coming out the end. And then once I get it installed in the machine, I figure I'll finish greasing it then. So here's kind of a close-up of the steering rack. I finished greasing those spherical ends and put the clips back on so they're nice and packed full of fresh grease. Everything's feeling good, and you can see the little Zerk there in the steering rack, and the grease is just starting to come out the end of the rack, and I'm just kind of explaining that to you. In a minute, I'm going to show you the old bolts. You can see them right on the workbench there next to that Xbox controller. Those were the types of bolts in the original or stock steering rack. They actually had grooves on them so that they really bit into the rack, so that thing wasn't going to loosen up on you, which is nice, but I don't think it's really necessary. The Super ATV folks, they give us new hardware, and it's got lock nuts on it. It should not be an issue whatsoever. There's kind of a close-up of those grooves on the bolts, and there's the new hardware. We're going to use that. The only thing you need to be careful is there's two bolts that are 5 millimeters longer than the others, and it makes a difference. The longer ones go on the worm drive side, and the shorter ones go on the other side. The frustrating part about not having audio in this video is I actually checked the receiver on the mic to make sure it was receiving audio, and it was. So the more I think about it, the more I think I didn't have the plug seated in the GoPro correctly. That's the only thing I can think of. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to get this rack in there. It's not about just sliding the rack in and bolting it up. You've got a steering shaft with the universal joint on the end that you've got to get on the end of that steering rack and fit all that in, keep your steering wheel straight. It's not hard. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's hard at all. It's just a lot of things that you want to make sure line up so that you don't have problems with your alignment later. I literally know guys that have done this job and they end up pulling their steering wheel off to clock it. And it's just to go through all that and then have to pull your wheel as well as, what a bummer. All right, so I'm giving you a peek in here. I got the rack in. You've got to make sure you take the bolt out of, that universal joint, or it's not going to slide in. I always try and store the bolts where they go when I dismantle. So I actually left that bolt in, and I was fighting getting that rack in. And I'm like, you idiot. You left the bolt in there. Once I took the bolt out, everything went fine. It was just kind of like, ugh, dummy. And you can see my steering wheel moved just a little bit. So keep checking that. No matter how careful you think you are, you just keep checking to make sure your steering wheel stays straight. You'll thank me later. All right, steering rack's installed. So now we have to tip the diff back up. Basically, you've got to push up the rear of the differential, and then you put there's a long bolt that slides into the housing and bolts it in place. My sway bar end link is kind of in the way for the path of that bolt, so I just pop that real quick, put the bolt in, put the sway bar end link back on, and here I'm bolting up that bolt. You do have to make sure the yoke of the diff goes into your front drive shaft, which, we were good. And now I'm basically going to take the roll pin and pound that roll pin in place, which will connect that joint, the universal joint, to the steering shaft, which that went well. Everybody has their own way of doing it, but one thing that might be a little tip for someone is my punch set is a hexagon, so it'll fit right in a socket, so you can use extensions if you need a little bit extra. And that's what I did. And it made it real easy, because otherwise you're trying to get real close in there and pound in your machine while there's tons of other places and parts in there. So that just made it easier, if that helps someone. All right, it's time to get this front frame section back in place. And all I'm trying to do is explain to you here, Polaris says that the nut on the bolt is a one-time use. Partzilla confirmed it. I cannot tell any problem with reusing that nut. I really can't, but I'm not risking it. So I bought 4 new bolts. I think I told you earlier they got lost, and Partzilla came back and got us new ones. There's the part number direct from Polaris. And to me, it's just not worth it. They say to not reuse them. Fine, I won't reuse them. They're not expensive. I think it was like less than $20 to send it to me. Not worth taking a chance, that's for sure. So that's all I'm doing here is getting those ready. We'll speed ahead and get that frame section installed. I know you guys love seeing me crawl around on the ground. How I did this install, pretty simple. There's 4 bolts in the front that clips to the upper frame, and I put a bolt in on each side just so it'll pivot. And then it's great work. I know you guys love seeing me crawl around on the ground, being old and you all can feel it. Trust me, I could feel it as well. But we're slowly getting the bolts in. There's not a lot of room. Actually kind of screwed up here, in my opinion. Just put in the 2 rear bolts and then get them tight. And then once you get them tight, then put in the front bottom bolts. There's just not a lot of access. And if you put the front ones in too, which I did, you can't really get to the rear nuts to make sure they're really tight. And these are not ones you want to snug up. These need to be tight. So no impacts, nothing like that. Use your actual wrenches and your ratchets, and make sure you get a good feel for them. Once I do that, I got the other bolts in the top. I did use my Milwaukee cordless ratchet on that. Not a big deal. I don't think those are as critical. And then we're going to get into putting the A-arms on, which went really smooth. I really didn't have any issues there. For those that didn't watch part 1 of this, which was the disassembly, the whole reason for the steering rack replacement is, yes, my steering is loose in the rack. You can feel it, and I know it's there because everything else in the front end is literally brand new. Ball joints, bearings, tie rods, bushings, A-arms, literally everything is brand new. I've always had a clunk, like at low speed turning, and it's driven us nuts over the years. I mean, this is a 2020, so it's like 5 years old. And at first we thought it was a major problem and took it back to Polaris when it was brand new. And they actually replaced the hubs. This used to have aluminum hubs on it, and they put on some steel hubs on it, or knuckles. And that's not it. I found out later they didn't actually put on steel knuckles because they're definitely aluminum hubs. Not a big deal. I don't think it was really the hubs anyway. Then I replaced bearings, just you name it. I mean, you can see the videos on my channel chasing this problem. But it definitely was something that was annoying. I mean, it almost felt like something could at one point just fall over and break. I don't know. So anyway, this was the last component that I could think of that could possibly be. And by now, I had enough miles on the machine that my steering rack was getting a little sloppy anyway, so I didn't feel bad just swapping it out. So that's kind of where we're here, and that's what we're chasing to try and fix. All I'm doing here, by the way, is putting in the lower A-arms and hooking up the ball joints into the hubs. I remember the other side went super smooth. This side gave me a little bit of trouble, but we got it in there. Basically what was happening when I went to spread the ball joint receiver on the hub, I broke off a flat blade screwdriver, kind of trying to pry it apart, and a part of that screwdriver stayed in the knuckle. So I had a little bit of time trying to get that part out. But once I got it out, everything tightened up and we were good to go. All right, so here's actually kind of an important part of the video. I'm getting ready to align the machine. I've got everything back on except for like the winch and the bumper. Crap, that doesn't matter. But the front suspension is back together. The steering's back together. And now we're ready to start aligning the machine. This is definitely a how I do it, not a how-to video. I happen to have a little laser level, and I use that. I get it perfectly centered on the machine front to back, which gives you an even midpoint to measure from. And it's kind of a pain in the butt to get it there. I mean, I probably spent 10 minutes getting that laser beam centered on the center of the machine in the front as well as the back. The beam's a little hard to see during the day or daylight. I think I go back here and try and show it to you, and you can't really see shit. I do have a mark that I had used the plumb bob to get down. That's the exact center, and that laser beam does go through that mark, but I think I turn off the lights here and kind of show you so you can see it. There you can see that beam showing up a little bit better. I have a fairly inexpensive laser that I got off Amazon. I don't really remember the brand. Spend a little bit more money, get a brighter beam. That's kind of how that works. But I can just tell you I'm perfectly centered from the front to the back of the machine. And then once you get that part done, you're able to measure off that line, and that becomes super critical to you, because you can, what you want to establish is the front two wheels and tires to be parallel to that line originally. You want your wheels and tires to be totally straight front to back, and that's absolutely critical to get it to that point first. Once you get it to that point, then you can start messing around with your toe in. You do it before then, you're going to have a problem. I guarantee it. I've done it enough times, you just have an issue. So my alignment tool, to get it set up, I have to put the wheels and tires on. I'm not putting them on super tight. I only use 2 lugs to get them flat against the hub. I'm not going to be driving. I'm putting on my alignment tool right now. And I mean, there's a lot of different brands. I think I'm going to get to a point where I show you a shot of it. But once you get it set up, you'll kind of see how this whole system works. It's kind of neat. All right, so my alignment tool is from Quick Trick. Not a super expensive tool, but man, it works really well, especially for ATVs and UTVs. It's not expensive. Gives you the 2 alignment tool ends, gives you the tape measures. It works real well. This is it set up, basically. It comes with the 2 tape measures, the speed square and the Big 12's speed square on the floor is mine, as well as the other tape measure. And all I'm going to do is get the front and back of each wheel and tire parallel with that line. And I'm saying all sorts of really smart stuff, giving you great advice here. But unfortunately, I'm an idiot with technology, and you can't hear any of it. But that's all I'm doing. I'm just measuring. It's not rocket science. You're adjusting your tie rods in and out by spinning that tie rod just to get both straight. And this is obviously off the ground at rest. And that's what I mean. How this acts at rest is not how it's going to be after you cycle it with weight. It'll be close. I mean, that's all you can really hope for, but it's not going to be exact. So don't think you're going to do this once, set it and forget it and be done. But pretty smooth process. That's all I'm going to say. If you have a tool like this, and like I said, I think it was like $100 or whatever, this is effortless and makes it go super quick. I think I have maybe, once it's set up, I probably have a total of 15 to 20 minutes setting it up, and I've got less than 10 minutes in actually aligning the machine. All right, the mics are dying. The batteries are dying on the mics. So what we've done, we've got this wheel parallel with the center line of the machine. We got this wheel parallel with the center line of the machine. Now what we've got to do is we've got to look at these 2 tape measures and see how they look, how the dimensions look. We got a little bit of a sag in there, so we're going to pull this one tight. When I pull it tight, I get, we're going to call it 63 and 5/8. We have no play in this guy. Sorry guys, I need 2 hands for a minute. So we have a back dimension of say 64, and in the front 63, and we're going to call it 5/8, almost 3/4. So unfortunately, I can't show you what I need to do to adjust this thing because I'm going to leave it. All right, guys, I took it for a test rip. My steering wheel was off maybe 4 or 5 degrees, I don't know, just a little bit. So I just cheated the tie rods to the passenger side a little bit. Just did one equal turn on each side, and it's dead nuts now. So I'm pretty happy with it. That's going to do it for this video. Really appreciate you guys tuning in and watching this old guy's videos. Take care, man. Just wanted to say thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.